All yours.
Okay. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today, Tuesday, the 25th of August, to our workshop that we have, our staff meeting, as it's called as well. So with that, I'll hand it over to Tom Stolz.
Thanks, Chairman. Good morning, Commission. We have three items to talk about today at the staff meeting. First of all, we'll talk about COVID update, and Sheriff Easter's here because the big change in COVID numbers and what the dashboard has reflected is some of the jail numbers that for the last three weeks we've been talking about. That kind of just hit the numbers. So he's here today just to give you an update on the jail and what they've gone through the last week there. Then Penny will be here and Jim Weber, and we will talk about our fleet policy in reference to acquisition of dump trucks, which came up during last Wednesday's BOCC meeting. And then Jim has an update on some North Junction financing information that he just got this morning that he would like to just talk through with you. So those are the three items. And with that, I'll turn it over to the sheriff and he can give us an update.
Morning, Sheriff.
Morning, Commissioners. Appreciate you giving me the time today. So basically, right around the 30th of July, we tested some of our inmates that were showing symptoms. There was a couple of them, one down at the annex, one in a dormitory, which was our inmate worker dormitory, because they started showing symptoms. They both came back positive. We had to replace all of the inmate workers, and the inmate workers are the ones that help in the kitchen and then also help sanitize all the cells and the rooms and those type of things. We then started seeing some more folks that we felt were positive. We tested about 23, and that's the original number we had was 23. At that point, we started separating, of course, the positives from the negatives. We got contacted by KDHE wanting to know if we wanted any type of assistance due to the fact that they dealt with the same issue at Lansing Prison, where they actually had staff members and inmates that had passed away. And we asked them to come down and help us through with a plan. The first part of that plan was to test every inmate that we had in housing. They brought 3,000 tests. The health department assisted with collecting those tests, and we were doing about 300 a day, and then driving them ourselves up to Topeka to the lab for them to be finalized. That was about a 2-day turnaround instead of a 5 or 6 day turnaround. So the last numbers we gave at the news release that we did, let's see here. We had 469 positive cases, 700 negative cases. Since that time, KDHE also wanted us to start testing the negatives. As of this morning, we had 742 positives, 1,136 negatives. Now, the deceiving thing about those numbers that's from the day we started. So we have a very transient population. That doesn't mean we have 742 people that are infected in there right now. And to illustrate that, in April of this year, we booked 889 people and released 953. In May, we booked 1,349 and released 1,283. In June, we booked 1,486 and released 1,410. In July, we booked 1,507 and released 1,432. Okay? So what that means is that we're going to get up to the thousands because of the way the numbers are tracked. Doesn't mean they're all positive still in there or they're all negative still in there. So again, the KDHE wanted us to test all the negatives again twice. We started the first round of testing negative prisoners, and quickly 65 of them came back positive. We have made the decision we're not testing anybody else in there unless they're symptomatic. The reason for that is in a jail, we only have X amount of space that's allocated, period. And so when you start splitting folks up by positive and negative, we're able to handle that pretty decently. because of all the testing that we were doing, that means down in booking, there was 150 people down in booking. We don't have 150 beds. So that means people sleeping on concrete, those type of things, waiting for us to be able to separate out all the prisoners in the different areas that they needed to go. Plus you have females. So females have to be separated out. Plus we have 98 homicide suspects. They can't be around anybody. Plus we have our sexual offender pod. They can't be around general population, and they're positive and negative. So we're sucking up our cells with all of these folks that cannot have contact with other people. And so we would have beds open in different areas simply because they cannot be around other people. And then we have people that are flagged against each other because of gang membership, because of whatever. The sexual offenders, we can't have them in a pod with anybody else because that is a safety issue for them. Because the other inmates will either prey on them or beat them up, basically, because of the offenses that they've allegedly have committed. So when you throw all of that into the mix, we're running out of places to put people. Plus, since that time, all the folks that we were testing at the end of July and beginning of August, 10 days later, they're not showing signs, they don't have a fever, and so they've recovered. Well, those numbers don't reflect that either. And that's hundreds of prisoners that have recovered. The fact of the matter is, I don't control who comes into jail. The sheriff's office doesn't control who gets out of jail. Okay? We have to hold them until a judge determines they should be released or because the bond was made, period. So some of the rhetoric that's out there that the sheriff just needs to let them out, I don't have the authority to let anybody out of jail, period. One of the things that, again, we're doing the 10-day quarantine. Now our booking is down to about 50, which is a lot more manageable in the booking area. Once they are determined that they're going to be housed with us, they are tested. The males will go to pod 8, where they'll be quarantined for 10 days. The females will go to pod 5, I believe, or pod 22, where they'll be quarantined. So the females, that's a pod that, yeah, we might have 1,406 beds, but unless there's a lot of females booked, that's 55 beds in there. Half of them are sitting empty right now because we have to quarantine these folks coming into housing. And so the other thing that I want to touch on, 70% of our population is felons. So if you look at the numbers of the bookings and releases, you can see in April we were releasing more people than we were booking. Starting in May, we were not. And in July, we booked 1,507 and 1,432 stayed with us. We have a lot of violent crime going on in this community. So a lot more people are having to stay with us of violent crimes. We also have, working with the city of Wichita to go back to them not booking folks for the minor city misdemeanors, instead providing them a court date. Folks who missed their court date over at the city were involved as well. Usually if we run into them, they have warrants. We take them to jail. Right now, we just issue them a court date for city. The county state statutes for misdemeanors, we're doing the same thing. If our folks are running into people with, depending on the misdemeanor, if it's a sexual battery or something like that, they're going to be booked. But you're talking about failure to appears and some of the other kind of minor type of violations. The problem we have is that in probation and parole, those folks get about 6 chances before they even ever come back into the facility. So usually it's about 5 or 6 violations, and then finally the judge says, okay, enough is enough, you're going back in. And so this mantra out there that folks are just doing minor violations and going back to jail on a minor infraction, I'm telling you, it isn't true either. It's several minor infractions that finally add up where a judge says, I'm going to hold you responsible because you can't follow the rules when you're out in society. The other thing that I've been hearing about is well, what are we going to do with these folks that are released? Are you going to release them to jail? How can we do that? I have no choice. It's illegal for me to hold somebody after a judge says let them go. So they're not being held. But I also equate that to the fact that When you go to a doctor and get tested, what does the doctor tell you? Go home, quarantine, stay put. Well, these are adults. So the same thing needs to be told to them. Do I think that some of these folks are going to do that? No, I don't think so at all. The fact of the matter is 10% of our inmates are even wearing the mask that we issue them. 10% is what we're estimating now. I went into the pod the other day. There's 55 inmates in there. 2 are wearing them. We're sanitizing. We're cleaning. We're providing them with the masks. They're choosing not to wear them. We are not going to force them to wear them, because then that's a use of force issue that we have to start facing. And then the inmates will say how we're beating them up and stuff. This is not an easy task to go through, okay? And so we have to make a lot of decisions, and a lot of serious decisions, and just like you all with the COVID stuff, they're all bad decisions. Which is the best of the bad decision that we got to make? And so that's where we're at now. Like I said, we'll do another press release and update. We got a Zoom meeting with some senators in the Ministerial League today at 10:30, where they're wanting to ask a lot of questions about what's going on. And again, we have inmates that, because they have access to email, they have access to letters, they have access still to the phone system and to the internet visitation stuff, that are putting out a lot of information that simply is not true at all. Nobody likes being in jail. They don't like being in jail. I've seen it across the nation where a lot of folks have cleaned out their jails because of COVID, and their crime rates have gone way up again. That's something that the judge and Mark Bennett has weighed. We did it with some very minor violations. I say very minor, non-violent. So your property crimes that they didn't have an arrest history or a conviction history. Folks that didn't pay their child support. That was about 50 inmates in March that were released, and then other city misdemeanors. Right now, the jail's full of folks that don't reflect that population. So that's why you're not seeing the numbers go down, because it's a public safety issue as well. So all of that stuff is being weighed, and we're trying to determine what is the best route at this point. I will tell you, the out-of-county housing folks, which I don't blame them, so the other counties, they're not taking any of our inmates right now because of the COVID issue we have here. I read an article the other day. There were some other major jails that did this exact same thing, and tested everybody and everything else. The CDC isn't even recommending doing that anymore. And so in a tight environment like that, where folks aren't going to follow the rules when you tell them the rules, unlike all of our families are probably following, it's going to spread. Our job is to make sure that they're as safe and secure in there as possible, and we have 24-hour medical service in there, which are seeing all of these folks. We have currently right now 2 people that are in the hospital. We took actions immediately, knowing who some of our folks were that had major health issues, and immediately when they showed any sign whatsoever, they were taken to the hospital. We've taken probably 10 now to the hospital. 8 have come back. And so I will tell you, because it will probably, and I know the Eagles here, we have one individual that has serious health issues. He's here for alleged sex crimes. He's right around 70 years old. He has organs shutting down and those type of things. So we took him to the hospital. Once he was there, they tested him and he did test positive. Are any of his issues related to COVID? No. They're related to health issues that he's been battling for quite some time. And now he's got organs that are shutting down. And so if that person happens to pass, that's the real story behind it. And with that, I'll take any questions you might have.
Thank you, Sheriff. I appreciate it. So you have a Zoom call this morning with some members of the community. I spoke with Senator Aletha Faust-Godot yesterday. I think she had spoke to you as well.
Yes.
And so I assume she's going to be on the call.
She is.
She was pretty receptive to our conversation, and fortunately my conversation with her was similar to yours, and me and you had not talked. So I think getting this information out in the public is incredibly valuable. I do see the Eagle is here, and I know, Dion, you missed the first 2 or 3 minutes of his presentation. I'd encourage you to watch that because he gave some very serious, great numbers and great background right before you got here. So with that, Commissioner Dennis.
Thank you. Well, good morning, Sheriff, and thank you for being here. We appreciate the update. I think my question is probably mainly for the manager. We passed the testing with the company in Lenexa, which may help the sheriff. Where are we at on that contract?
Mike Messenger from our legal office is meeting with attorneys for the Lenexa company today at 4 p.m., and we're trying to work out a deal. So
When do we expect a contract so we can start using the
I think
saliva
we'll
test?
know after 4 o'clock today
After
what
4.
the rules of engagement will be for that.
Very good. Well, hopefully that'll make it a little easier if you need to test more folks, if we can use that saliva test rather than having to use that nasal pharyngeal test. So
Yeah, the key to all of that is the slowdown time is taking it or shipping it to some company who then takes it or ships it up to Topeka. That's the time frame that is taking longer. The actual reading of it and giving us results back is actually very timely. We got some back within a day. All came back within 2 days. But that's because we were driving it to Topeka every night.
very good. Well, I know you got a tough job over there and you're doing a great job. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. I got another quick question. On the chart, and these are the positive cases chart, does it reflects the 500, 600 plus?
It does. That's
Inmates.
I don't want to say that the jail caused that whole increase, but it clearly caused a good percentage of that increase. So then the debate is, well, how do we show this? Do we put an asterisk on and with some type of, these are jail cases? But as the sheriff talked about, it's a transitory population over there. So the people that test positive aren't setting over there anymore. They're out in the community with their families or hopefully
Right.
isolating or quarantining, although the sheriff spot on, they're probably not. So it's community cases. We'll have to reconcile them.
Yeah, that's hard to just say what are the positive cases in the community, because between the jail and actually the care home people, they're all under lockdown basically. You can't go in. I can't see my aunt still today. So a lot of those positive cases are very controlled.
If you don't mind, there's two other
You bet.
things that I'd
Sure.
like
Go ahead.
to mention. Right now, we only have 8 people that are showing signs. They are all up in the clinic. During this time frame, we had 2 failed rack downs because of folks that were positive. The recommendation in the beginning was we isolate them in their cells, and you only let them out for an hour at a time by themselves. And these were folks that hadn't done anything wrong; they're sick, and most of them were saying, "I don't even feel sick. Why am I here?"
Right.
We had, when I say failure to rack, usually that's just one inmate telling you, "I'm not going back in there." We had to bring squads of people in to get inmates back in. That's when I reached out to KDHE and said, this makes no sense. Why, if they're all positive, why can't they be around each other? Because it is causing stress for the inmates, it's causing stress for us, and KDHE said, yeah, that you need to let them out. Just make sure that they're all in the same cell if they're or the same pod if they're positive. So that relieves some of that stress that was going on the first week. But again, we only have 8 right now that are showing any symptoms.
Okay. Commissioner Cruz has a question or comment.
Thank you, Chairman. How many, could you give us like a percentage, if you could, of the folks that are sitting in jail that are nonviolent, but sitting on bond with an inability to pay?
I'd have to get back with you on that because that was the other group that was looked at in March. So, some folks from were sitting there on a $5,000 bond from the city of Wichita for failure to appear or something like that, and couldn't post the $500 to get out. And so, or $2,500 bond, and they couldn't post $50. So, those folks were released right up front.
In March?
In March. I'd have to go back and take a look now to see what those percentages are. Again, I've had a group of 10 that has been running this whole show on this, and they were working from 8 in the morning till 3:30 because it was taking them until 3:30 at night after they got the test back to actually move inmates to the proper areas based upon all those categories that I said. And so I'll have to get back with you on that to see how many are sitting there on misdemeanor bonds and bonds for nonviolent felonies.
Yeah, I'd like to know that because it's been 5 months, since the original release of those, that type of individual. So perhaps we could alleviate some.
Well, I can tell you that when this happened the first time, that population went down and down and down really quickly to 1,200. If those folks are sitting in there, and we requested this almost 2.5 weeks ago, and today we're at 1,535 inmates. I will get you the numbers, but I'd venture to say those folks aren't there anymore. This is due to the rise in all the crime that's taking place around here, both
Okay.
in the city and the county.
Thank you, I appreciate that. And you said something, there are no good decisions. Well, I don't envy you. I would have to say that these are all hard decisions. Some of them are good, right? Some of them are bad. They're not all bad.
The COVID is questions. So
Yeah, I think we all can attest to that. So you have a very difficult job. I don't envy your situation. I did have one final question. I received a question from, and I just want to ask it here, the ankle monitoring. If there was an ability to get, obviously if they're violent, we don't want them in our community, right? Or they have a conviction that would warrant them being in jail right now. But could you just speak to that? So that
yeah,
people
so that's more of Glenda Martin's arena, so I don't want to step on any of that. But the meetings that we've had with Tom Struble and stuff, their pretrial release numbers are way, way up. And so for the staff to handle those numbers, the amount of bracelets they have is really big right now. And it's well over their capacity. And so they're already doing that. But I don't know how much more they could handle, to be real honest with you. And I don't know. That's just a meeting about 3 weeks ago that we had. So I really don't know that. But I know it's being utilized a lot more than it ever has in the past. The problem is weighing public safety and staffing issues to be able to monitor all that, plus those systems.
Okay, thank you. And I just thought of one more thing. Is there a way, Commissioner MEITZNER kind of already touched on it, so we probably all received the same email, but a community member wanted to know if we could filter this out, take out jail and take out our senior living population to see how those two groups, is there a way to do that?
We'll figure out a way to do it. There's a way to filter anything. We have meetings with IT this week, and then next week during staff, we're going to spend some significant time talking about dashboard and how we display the numbers. And Chairman raised the issue. I actually, in the long-term care facilities, that's actually more of a confined population that is not transitory. So it's actually, those cluster cases are less concerning than the jail cluster cases because the jail is so transitory in nature that becomes more of a community issue. But we'll separate these out. I do think we need to all understand, particularly with schools opening back up, that the increase that we're seeing from the last week or two is clearly has been impacted by these numbers. So how we filter that and how we show that moving forward, I think we ought to be honest about that. So
Well, by taking those two numbers out, we can see how many community members and community spread, how much there is. Is that what you're showing us now? Excluding
the
jail
mic, Kate.
and senior centers? Okay.
One thing that I'll just kind of end with, if that's okay. One lesson that we've learned out of this by testing everybody, if you took the same amount of tests out in the community and tested everybody, our numbers would be outrageous because there's folks in there again that have no signs, no symptoms, don't feel bad, and those type of things. And so, sorry.
Your job is never done.
Yeah, no kidding. So, again, I know in the beginning of this, there wasn't enough tests and those type of things. This is a sample of if you test everybody, what you would see, I would think. I think this is 1,500 inmates, at one point, half the population, at some point coming through the jail, was infected with it.
But to that point, if you had carriers who were spreading the virus to those, even though they didn't feel sick themselves, they could spread it to someone like the gentleman you mentioned who is very ill in your facility. Would that be the case? Would he be now in the hospital had he not contracted the virus? So, I mean, there are
Oh, he'd
a
be
lot
in the
of,
hospital anyway.
okay,
ma'am.
I'm just saying, but for other members in our community, that's something to think about.
Okay, thank you, Commissioner Cruz. Commissioner Howell.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank you, Sheriff, for being here and giving us all this information. It's really helpful. You did mention quite a few numbers at the beginning of this, and I'm not quite sure I'm clear exactly how many tests have been conducted overall and how many positive cases have we had overall. You did say kind of at the end there 742, but then you mentioned 65 more, and so I wasn't sure if that should add those together, or is it 7?
Yeah, the 65 is added into the 742
Okay,
for
742 is a high
positives.
number so far.
Yes,
Okay.
that includes everybody that we started retesting that was originally negative.
Okay.
And then the 1,136 that were negative. Now again, because the Eagle's here, I'm going to repeat that doesn't mean we have 742 people that are infected in there. There's folks that have been released either on bond, court order, or they just never, or have just been released. That also doesn't include the numbers of recoveries. So again, all the folks from prior to 10 days ago are now recovered and are not positive in there. And so that's a lot. That's probably 300 to 400 inmates out of the 742.
What percentage of your jail population refused to submit to one of these tests?
A pretty small percentage, but we had probably 10 that was refusing.
And you mentioned 10 people have gone to the hospital. One of them still there. Actually, two are still there. Of those 10, how many were there because of COVID-19 complications?
Well, they have underlying health issues,
Right.
tested positive, and so we sent them there as a precautionary measure. To say if they ever showed signs or symptoms, I'd have to ask our nursing staff. I don't know the answer
These
to
are
that.
folks that were admitted to the hospital. Did any of them go to ICU? Do you know?
No, but well, the one gentleman that's having the organ failure is in ICU.
I'm with you.
The rest of them did not.
Okay. And you've not really talked about your staff too much today. I'm just curious what your situation with staff this morning.
We have a class of 18 that's getting ready to graduate from the field training deputy training that goes on. That will happen September 1st. That's 18. We are 62 short, and we had 28 of our staff so far test positive.
So I could add those together. You have about roughly 90 positions that are not being filled right now because of those two situations.
Correct.
Okay. Are you managing that okay? I mean, that sounds like a pretty
It's
things are
very
complicated
difficult.
anyway, and your jail is full.
Yeah, we had lieutenants and captains over the weekend that were manning pods because we just don't have enough people. We're interviewing for a class that we're hoping to start in September. We're hoping right now it looks like we'll probably get about 40 folks in that class.
I'll say I appreciate all you're doing. I know it's a very complicated and difficult situation, but I think you're demonstrating great leadership and it's tough, and I appreciate what you're doing over there. Good job.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I'll make sure and relay that to the staff because they're doing all the work.
Okay, Sheriff. Thank you. I don't see other questions. Appreciate the update. It's very valuable for us and for the community.
Thank you all very much. Have a good day.
Okay.
If there's no other questions on COVID update, we'll move to the next subject. So Penny
Next subject.
will take us, I'll set the table here a little bit while Penny's getting the podium, but at last Wednesday's meeting on bid board, there was 4 dump trucks that came up. There was some questions. really kind of about policy of replacement. So that's what Penny's here today to talk us through, and Jim Weber here is as well. So if possible, Penny could go through her presentation and then let Jim get up and give a few words, and then we could do questions for both of them at the commission's convenience. So.
Good morning.
Good
Penny
morning,
Poland,
Penny.
Fleet
Welcome.
Management.
Welcome to the commission.
Good morning. I would like to brief you on the 15-point replacement system that we are currently using. This presentation was last presented at a staff meeting in September of 2017. So I'd like to give you our mission statement to provide proper vehicles and equipment, effective fuel services, and high-quality, timely maintenance to our departments. Our main KPI is fleet availability. So that means we try to have the vehicles and equipment available to departments 95% of the time. That's our goal. For 2019, we exceeded that goal, hitting 96.4%. However, the dump truck fleet availability for 2019 was 79.9%. Just to give you some history, prior to 2017, our primary indicators for replacement was mileage and age. That gave us a better ability to forecast our budget. But at that point, we were not using any kind of life cycle cost to determine replacement. It was just age and mileage. Our current replacement strategy uses a combination of life cycle costs and life expectancy criteria. It allows flexibility to identify units that are reaching the replacement marker in miles and age, which may be performing efficiently, or those that may not be nearing replacement, but they're not operating efficiently. Our goal is to maximize the cost effectiveness by optimizing the overall life cycle by using those three components of age, miles, and life cycle costs. So at this point, the 15-point replacement is what we decided to start using in 2017. It adds an extra layer of scrutiny in regards to how the equipment is performing. There are three factors which we use to evaluate the points for a piece of equipment. Our software tracks and calculates all these components. The first one is life-to-date maintenance costs, which when a vehicle or piece of equipment comes into our shop, we immediately create a work order, and that captures parts and labor and any sublet costs. So those points are calculated by the percentage of the current life-to-date maintenance and repair costs divided by the acquisition cost of the equipment. This category can go up to 10 points. The life-to-date mileage and hours are calculated by the percentage of the current life-to-date meter divided by the life expectancy in miles and hours. This category has a 5-point maximum. The expended life in months, the points are calculated by the percentage of the current life in months divided by expected life in months. There's a 5-point maximum. So we will be able to identify equipment that is operating efficiently and possibly extend that life. So if it meets the age and the miles and it hits the 5, but maintenance is low, at that point we would keep that vehicle in the fleet because we're not paying a lot in maintenance costs. But it also lets us identify vehicles that aren't performing efficiently because every time that vehicle comes in, it creates a work order and it also creates downtime for the department. And that's an indicator to us that it's not performing efficiently and it needs to be evaluated for replacement. Now at this point, while we're talking about the 15-point, I want to point out that it's just a tool. We use it as part of the evaluation process. I also want to note that this software we have used since 1999. It captures all data of the equipment from acquisition to retirement. So everything that happens to that equipment, maintenance, fuel, anything, is captured in there and it tracks it. Over 380 entities, government, are using this type of software to track their assets. It's reliable, it's dependable, and it fluctuates with the industry. So we get updates probably every 2 years to update our software. And I recently found out the city of Wichita has acquired it, and they're going to start using it as well. So what we're using here, I believe, is something that is an industry, that uses industry standards in their application. Okay, the next slide is reflecting our criteria for replacement. So all of our equipment is categorized by class. When we enter it into the software, I enter in the projected miles and the age. Those components go in there, and that's what the software uses to determine the points. And I also wanted to note on this slide, you'll see two categories that have asterisks by them. The ambulances and the heavy-duty trucks, they take 6 to 8 months to build. So we're trying to purchase them with that time frame in mind so that we can get them before they go overdue. Okay, the next slide is going to show you a breakdown of each of the 4 dump trucks that we're proposing to replace. It breaks down the points, the miles, the maintenance, and the age, and then you have the total points. Then I also included, this is the lifetime maintenance and repairs dollars spent on those 4 dump trucks. I've also included a couple of pictures that kind of shows some of the deterioration from corrosion from the salt and the brine and just the environment that these dump trucks are in. And these are the kinds of things that can cause failures in these dump trucks that cause increased maintenance. And I stand for any questions.
Penny, thank you for the update, being how this program was put in place before a couple of commissioners were on staff. It was nice for me to hear the history of what was and then what is currently in place. So I appreciate it very much. There is
Chairman,
maybe a
could we
question.
maybe let Jim hit the podium right now? I think he had a few additional comments, and then you guys could do
Okay.
questions with all.
Do you want to wait on your question?
No, I'll wait.
Okay. Morning, Jim.
Good morning.
Thanks for
Jim
being
Weber again. Just a couple of highlights, I think. We have 22 of these Class 8 dump trucks, tandem axle dump trucks. For us, it's the primary work tool that we're using. I want you to keep in mind that when Fleet is buying trucks, they're buying the truck, the sand spreader, the de-icing spray system, and the plow. It's the entire rig. One of the things they did do on the last buy a year ago, because it works much better if we buy all of that together, there's need to be specifically set up for the truck that they're on. We can't just take one spreader off of a Kenworth and throw it onto a Peterbilt. And the spreaders, all that snow equipment, it takes a beating, and so it needs to go out at the same time. So this is the second buy with all of that together. So part of that drives the cost of the initial equipment, but also is driving some maintenance costs on the whole setup. Of the 22 trucks, 19 are set up with plows and spreader boxes and the spray equipment. One of them, the first picture she showed you, showed the tank in it. We do have one that we leave set up for just putting down brine to pre-treat. It's got the big tank on it and the spray bars. And we have 2 that are what I'll call straight trucks. They don't have the rest of the equipment with them, but they are spares. When we go into snow season, we can pull a spreader box off of a same branded truck and move it over to that one if they fail. So we have 19 trucks actively doing snow removal. Our system is pretty much built around that. That's the most critical operation we have. This past winter, I don't say we had a really bad snow, but it seemed like we went out weekly for 6 or 7 weeks, and we ran for 3 days straight, 24 hours a day. When we started, when we were going into the snow season, just anecdotally, out of the 22 trucks, 6 were sitting on the line waiting for repairs. And I'm not criticizing Fleet, because there are some issues here that don't have anything to do with them. You get trucks that just have problems, and you got to wait to get them to a sublet shop to get something done. It's a problem. So The most significant thing I see in the slides is that less than 80% uptime for these dump trucks, which is why we'd like to see them keep rolling in and out and keep them rolling. We need them. We do have some wide variety in meters, hour meters, and mileage on these things. Been talking to our people. We probably could do a better job of these have, if you look at the two Peterbilts that are in this buy, they were with our truck crew, and they're doing more what I call long haul stuff. They're hauling materials out of the quarries or out of the sand pits that we're buying and up, and they move more. And so their hours and their mileage look more like you would expect it to look. The two Kenworths have been in our one of our 4 yards, and those are trucks that are doing more of they're following the ditch cleaning crew, or they're pulling shoulders, or doing chip seals, and it's more of a low speed, short trips. And so I do think we have kind of an imbalance in the fleet. And I think one of the things, we've added a position next year for a CDL trainer, and I think one of the things we would want to have them do is start kind of managing the distribution of trucks in the fleet and try to get them more balanced up. But having said that, if you look at the numbers that Penny's showing you for maintenance costs, the low mileage trucks are spending a lot of money, just like the high mileage trucks. And so we just would encourage you to, I guess, stick with the policy and just keep rolling these things out, and we'll do things that we can to try to work it a little bit better. But it's important to us, and it's important when we get into winter work that we have trucks that'll run. So if we can't put a truck out, we can't clear. So I'd be happy to answer any questions I can.
Yeah, thank you for the further explanation. Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you. I appreciate it. Benny and Jim, thank you very much for your going over this again. I know that you developed this a couple years ago because I was very concerned about trading off very expensive large vehicles at a fairly early time. We, the 5 of us, are responsible to make sure that we spend our taxpayers' money as efficiently and as effectively as we can. And that's why we always ask questions like this, to make sure that we're doing the best job that we can. If you go back and look at the bid board, you look at the cost of those vehicles and divide it by the miles, you're going to be seeing that those vehicles are costing us 60, 70, 80 cents a mile to operate over the time that we've had them, which is a fairly expensive vehicle to operate. So we need to make sure that when Jim's folks are operating them, they're using them as effectively as they can because of the cost per mile that we're running them. The two things that you use for replacement, the life-to-date mileage or hours and the expended life in months, both of those numbers are fairly subjective, it appears to me. We need to make sure that they're based on the best knowledge that we have. These Peterbilts and Kenworths are trucks that are built that are very robust vehicles, and they're made to run an awful lot of miles. I sent you an email after our last meeting on engine replacement because I'd ask you a question about engine replacement. And I don't think that engine replacement on these old vehicles is out of line. When something gets up to a point that it needs an engine, just as in my personal car, if I need to replace an engine in it, it's probably cheaper for me to do that than it is to buy an entire new vehicle. So I want to make sure we're doing everything as efficiently and effectively as possible. The picture you show me is of corrosion on the side of a box. Corrosion on the side of a box has zero impact on the operation of that vehicle. I can't say that would have make me decide to trade it off. If we don't like the corrosion on the side of a vehicle, let's sandblast it and paint the side of the box. It doesn't affect what we put in that box. It doesn't affect what we take out of that box. So that picture to me is not something that makes me want to trade off a vehicle. I'm just not certain that we're at the right place subjectively on these trucks, on selecting the two grading criteria that you use for replacing the trucks. I guess I wouldn't have a problem with us keeping all 4 of those or some limited part of them and buying some more trucks and find out how long that they will run. Because right now, again, as I started, we have to make sure that we're spending the money for that the taxpayers give us in an effective and efficient manner. And our budgets are tight. We're not giving any pay raises next year, which hurts me quite a bit. And when they see that we're going to spend $800,000 for 4 new trucks, at the same time I'm not giving anybody a pay raise, that's a concern. So before we spend money to replace vehicles, I want to make sure that our subjective criteria is as accurate as we can get it. And it will always be subjective, and I understand that. But we truly need to make sure that those numbers get us to the exact point where we need to trade them off. I've already received phone calls from townships. They want to buy those 4 vehicles. They know that they're going to run them for a long time. So if they're of value to someone else, why aren't they of value to us? So that's where I'm coming from, and that's where I always come from when I'm questioning some of these high-value vehicles that we've got that are made to run a long time. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Commissioner Dennis. Commissioner Howell?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the extra information this morning. I do have a couple of questions. Looking at the summary chart that shows the number of points for these 4 vehicles, we're including the meter and the age. They're both adding into the number of points. I think that the older the vehicle is, the more hours or miles it's going to have on it. That's normal. I don't know that we ought to be using both of those criteria. We should use the highest. In other words, if you use age and as is one measurement, or use mileage or hours as another measurement, whichever one of those 2 is higher, should be included in this number, but not both. I think we have a fundamental problem with the formula here. So I guess I would question the formula. I don't think we're doing the right thing. Let me ask another basic question here. Talk about maintenance. You said maintenance or repair. Does maintenance include things like tires and that type of thing?
Yes, it includes all maintenance and repairs.
What about fuel?
No,
No fuel.
fuel is not included in the maintenance points.
But things like oil changes and things like
Yes,
that is included in
It
maintenance.
is.
I don't think we should be including any preventative maintenance in this number at all. We should take care of what we have, and that should not be a criteria for, I guess, getting rid of equipment. Now, repairs, I understand. And you guys mentioned that you had 6 vehicles in for repair. What types of repairs are we talking about? Are we talking about engines and transmissions? Or are we talking about something else, like very minor, that
Engine repair.
engine repair? Okay. Well, it sounds to me like maybe what we have is maybe 22 dump trucks is not the right number. And again, just because we have 6 out of 22 that are in for maintenance, if this type of stuff happens all the time, I guess buying more dump trucks to me is not the biggest question here, but selling the dump trucks is. And I've said before, I think we need to find out how long these will last. I think that repairs, we ought to take care of repairs. Obviously, we need to maintain what we have, but what we really need to measure ourselves is how many vehicles do we need to service Sedgwick County, and what's our rate of being able to meet that demand with the number of vehicles that we have. If we only need 16 vehicles to service Sedgwick County, then we met the criteria, 100%, even though we had 6 in for repair. But if we needed 20 trucks on the roads at all times, and we were down to 16, then we were 4 trucks short of what we actually needed to service Sedgwick County. That's a problem. So I guess I would measure ourselves not on how many trucks are in for maintenance or repair, but how many trucks we have available to us to meet the demand for Sedgwick County. And I don't think that's been presented today that I've seen so far. So if anybody wants to comment on that, I'd sure love to hear that perspective.
So our snow plan is built around 19 plow trucks and 1 brine truck, and then we have 2 trucks that we don't have rigged with that we consider to be spares because we could put them into service. So going into last winter's first storm, out of the 22, I don't know, doing the math quickly, we were probably 4 trucks short of having, now, I'll be totally honest, they scrambled and they got most of those trucks back in service. But I think they were calling vendors and they were squeezing people to get stuff done so that we could get them going. But in a snowstorm, also a high breakdown period. You start with 19, 20 trucks and you're good if you get through the week and you still have 19 running. They're going down as you go. The plowing operation, and some of you have driven our trucks with the plow on them, but the plowing operation is a very stressful thing on the truck. We've got the plow pushing at an off angle. We've got the PTO running the spreader bar. Probably not too much effort on the truck for the spray rig, but it's not like if we just haul gravel all day, these might last longer, but they're hauling, they're pushing, and as far as corrosion is concerned, I'm more concerned about what's happening in the chassis. I mean, they took pictures of the body, and I don't care about that either, but that's representative of what's going on in the chassis, which we've got a lot of stress on that chassis when we use it for what we use it for. I'd like to see the trucks compared to other trucks in the same kind of service, not trucks doing other kinds of work.
So if we wanted to enter into some type of a, I hate to use the word experiment because this is probably not the right word, but maybe a study to find out if we can use these trucks for a longer period of time, and maybe we need to have more than 22 trucks. If there's times you get down below what you need to operate in Sedgwick County, that's a problem. So I don't mind adding to the fleet. If that's the conversation we need to have here, let's talk about that. But I would rather see these trucks go into extended life. And again, we picked some, again, Commissioner Dennis stated it, but these are arbitrary numbers. We're talking about 250,000 miles or 8,500 engine hours. And I know we're actually taking both into account. The hours and the miles are being calculated. And then on top of that, we're adding in another factor for age.
Well, I want to say, I think that's one or the other, probably whichever one is worse. I don't think, it's not hours and miles to get points.
It takes age. It's just the mileage.
Just the mileage.
We set the
Okay.
policy has a criteria for hours, but the point system is only on the mileage.
Well, nevertheless, I guess my point is we're also taking in mileage and age as factors into this 15-point formula. I don't know that I agree with that, but let's just, I guess my point would be this. I don't care that the vehicle's 10 years old. To me, the condition of the vehicle and its dependability and its ability to do its job is the most important thing. And the age is not relevant. I don't think is a relevant factor here. I'd like to look at the condition of the vehicle and say, is it dependable? And I think the repair cost is probably a pretty good measurement of that. I don't know that I agree with the maintenance costs. So I'd like to have the maintenance costs separated out and look at repair costs and how dependable is it? How often is it going into the shop where it's not able to be used in service? To me, those, you say, well, we've had this vehicle out of the last year, it was in the shop for 3 months. That's a problem. It's not dependable. And you say, well, this year we fixed an engine and we got it back on the street, but then the following year we had another big problem, it was out again. And this just not been, it's becoming kind of a lemon for our fleet. That would talk about condition of the vehicle, and it's not able to be depended upon in terms of a fleet vehicle. That would be a much more appropriate measurement, in my opinion, is how often is it not available to be used as one of our 22 vehicles.
Based on their downtime calculations, it's not available 20% of the time. The rest of the fleet is available 96% of the time. It looks to me like our 80% uptime is what's dragging down the rest of the fleet, which might be available 98% of the time if we weren't down 20% of the time.
But you're pointing that to all the dump trucks, not just these 4.
Yeah, but I assume she could calculate it for every dump truck, but as a group, out of 22 dump trucks, they're down 20% of the time.
Okay, I guess I'm talking about on an individual vehicle basis. What's the dependability of that particular vehicle? I think we ought to be looking at that number. And then secondly, in terms of, if you want to measure the fleet as a whole, do you have enough vehicles to do the job every day of the year? And if you don't, we ought to have that conversation. What I would like to do, and I've brought this up years ago, and I'll bring it up again today, I would like to see us do some type of a study, a longevity study, to find out these vehicles will go, X miles. Our experience is the repair cost in that particular vehicle has, I talked to Penny about what we call the bathtub effect. when something's new, you work out the bugs, there's maybe some cost to get the thing settled into its role. And then there's a long period of time where it's very dependable, and you're just doing regular maintenance, preventative maintenance, and you can depend on this vehicle every day to do its job. And then towards the end of its life cycle, their costs start going up. And if you were to plot that on an XY graph, X being time, it would look like a bathtub. Once we hit the back end of the bathtub, it starts going up. That's the trigger for when we ought to move this vehicle off of our fleet. We're not looking at this way. We're looking at things arbitrary, like things like age and miles, not dependability. And I fundamentally have a problem with that. I think we ought to be looking at a study to find out what that bathtub looks like for these vehicles. That's all. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, thank you. Commissioner Cruz?
Thank you. So we changed the policy in 2017. Can you speak to what the policy was previously? Because I think we had a couple of commissioners that voted for this current policy. Is that correct? Okay. So the policy before in 2017 was measured how?
Excuse me, age and miles.
Age and miles, which is what they're asking for right now. Is that correct? You don't have to answer that. So, Jim, can you come back up here? Thank you, Penny. So, in your opinion, 30, how many years? 38? 38 years?
Yeah, 38.
I only know that because that's how old I am. So,
That's scary.
anyway, 1982 was a good year. So, in your opinion, is it what's best for Sedgwick County to purchase these vehicles now?
Yes. We need a dependable fleet, and right now, based on the policy that we have and the system that we're using, and probably any other system you would institute, these are your 4 worst trucks.
Okay.
I'm sensitive to what Commissioner Howell is saying. What we are not doing, and I think what he's really talking about, would be a full life cycle cost analysis of the vehicles. But we're not set up to do that. That probably, in my opinion, probably requires you to go out and get a fleet consultant who's set up to, inputs are, here's what the thing cost, based on a lot of big data across a whole lot of fleets, this is how long they last, this is what the life cycle looks like. You could do that, but in my opinion, that's not something that you're going to get out of faster, or you're going to have to get a consultant that does a lot of this to go through that and figure it out for you. So we're left with using the tools we have. And so the measurables are, what does it cost to operate it, maintain it really is what we're measuring. How many miles or hours does a vehicle have on it? And age. Age is a measure. I mean, there's a sort of a point of obsolescence for things. And we're not opposed to that. Up until recently, the vehicle I drove for the county vehicle is a 2005 Dodge Stratus that's got 60,000 miles on it. It doesn't have 13 points on it. We're still driving it. We're still using it. There's nothing, I don't think there's anything wrong with this policy or this mechanism. Certainly open to be tweaked, but it's kind of like you have to pick something, and if you want something really scientific, you have to go to full life cycle, which he's right. You get a bathtub. There's a curve on the back end for what the vehicle is worth on trade-in. We don't do trades, but on the auction, there's what it costs to bring it in, what it costs to operate it. And there is a sweet spot there. And I think what Fleet has done, I don't want to talk for them, but I will. What Fleet has done is tried to find the tools we have to work with that can try to identify the sweet spot. And these, we met before COVID every other week on Friday mornings. We have a staff meeting with our foreman. Bob would come over. Before him, Rex Victor would come over. We have a good relationship with Fleet, and we talk a lot about the vehicles. And our people and their people know what's going on with them. And so before Penny puts one on the list, they talk about whether this is a truck that belongs on the list. Short answer, I believe these trucks all need to be replaced. But
Okay.
we will do whatever it is you think needs to be done. We'll drive whatever you provide as long as it's running.
Okay, I appreciate you explaining that for us, and I respect your opinion. Thank you.
Okay, any other comments? Thank you, Commissioner Cruz. Okay, Penny, I don't see other questions.
Okay.
So thank you for all the information. I assume you can bring this you can talk amongst yourself and bring it back in front of us for a decision next meeting or two. Or Commissioner Dennis?
Well, thank you. Just to answer Commissioner Cruz's question, yeah, we implemented this new policy a couple years ago to find out a better way of making sure that we're grading our vehicles as we move forward. The thing that we didn't know at the time, and we still don't know, I think, are the two subjective areas that we use to grade it. And that's the question that I think Commissioner Howell and I both have, is we need to make sure that those subjective areas on mileage and hours and age are really the measurement that we need to use. And right now, I don't know that we have any scientific way of coming up with that. These are kind of arbitrary numbers that are subjective. And we just want to make sure that we're using the correct numbers for these type of vehicles. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Thank you. Commissioner O'Donnell?
Thank you. So, Penny, thank you for your presentation today. When we had met earlier about this, I did say that I would like to figure out some way that we could keep at least one, if not more, of these trucks and do some type of a test to see how long they can go and what's a truly useful life expectancy that we could get out of them to the point that they are fully functional. So I'd be good with coming up with a plan to move forward with purchasing some, if not all, of the trucks that you want, but also figuring out how do we keep this, because it's also, in my opinion, it's valuable information because we have two different types of trucks on here that you're wanting to get rid of, Kenworth and Peterbilt, and we're looking at buying, not Freightliners, Freightliners, yeah. So we're looking at these different trucks, and I think it'd be nice to have a policy where we try to stick with the same truck. I'm sure the guys in your shop would appreciate that too, that they're not working on multiple brands. I know we try to do that with the Sheriff's Department as well, having just two different forms, whether it's the Ford Interceptor or whether it's the Dodge Charger. At least maybe narrow it down instead of having multiple types of trucks, I think is another area we need to look at, particularly when some of these are better brands than others. They're more expensive, but they last a lot longer. So we might be able to get a lot more mileage out of one of the Peterbilts, for example, because they're kind of the gold standard in that area. So I'd be open to coming up with some hybrid solution where we still buy, but we also try to get a good case study out of one of these trucks. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'd like just to make another comment, just
Sure.
based on budgets. You know, it's a red flag to me when maintenance on a piece of equipment almost exceeds acquisition cost. That should be a red flag that this vehicle is not performing efficiently. And I ran some numbers from year to year on the work order numbers for all the dump trucks. In August 2017 to 2018, dump truck maintenance, all maintenance and repairs, 193,000. From 2018 to 2019, it jumped to 269,000. And from 2019 to 20, we're at 226,000. So when you look at those numbers and you see that the increased maintenance, it's going up, this isn't something that I think we should ignore. I think that there are maintenance issues with the trucks, and that should be an indicator, one of the main ones that you're looking at for replacement. And once again, I just want to emphasize, when you look at cost per mile, you really should look at cost per hour, not per mile. Because I think that's a better indicator of how the truck is performing.
Okay, thank you for that extra information. Okay. Tom, next up we have Jim Weber again.
Yep.
Unless,
Right, talk about North Junction.
okay. Bring hand those.
There's at least 3 there. Okay, again, Jim Weber. So this is about the North Junction, and just a brief review, there was a gold phase project up there, and the county and the city of Wichita and the state of Kansas have been trying to get federal funding, build grants or infra grants to help subsidize the cost of the next phase of the interchange. In the last transportation plan, the state did take what we call the accelerated gold phase out of the bigger project, and they have funded a major part of that next phase. And the city and the county are splitting some of the cost of that. Our cost in that phase is $3.75 million. In the CIP that you recently approved with the budget and the CIP amendment that was on the same day, we set up to pay our $3.75 million for that project in 2020 and 2021. So we have continued to work with the city and the state, and back in May, we submitted our third grant, a build grant application to the Federal Highway Administration for the rest of the gold phase project. And so what you have is the sheet out of that grant application that shows the funding split that's anticipated in that project. That's set up for the city and county would each participate to the tune of $7.5 million. KDOT's got $46 million worth of state funds in it. They are going to pull some federal funding into it. Excuse me. So last night, the Secretary of Transportation, USDOT, their office had sent an email to our contact over at the city of Wichita. And I think you know that we've been on some conference calls. Tom's been working with Jim Davenport with Thorn Run and really trying to push that build grant forward. Build grants are limited to $25 million. So the information coming out of the Secretary's office last night was, obviously they're looking at it, they're asking the question, what if you could only get 20 million? Would you pull the scope back on this project and what would that look like? Or would you locally pick up that extra 5 million? Thank you. Oh, that's great. This will go much better now.
These big projects require, your voice to be.
They do. And I'm a little
Get you
plugged up
choked.
in the ears today, so
didn't
hearing's
mean
a
it.
challenge.
All right, I'm glad you're not all choked up because it's a big project.
I live for this.
I know, okay.
Okay, so there's really no practical way to reduce the scope of the remainder of the gold phase project. And so the 5 million, if they were to fund the build grant at $20 million, the 5 million would have to be picked up by the local partners, the city, the state, and the county. And so I don't know that we're looking for a formal anything here today. My thinking is we don't have the grant. We should try to get the grant. It makes sense that somehow we'll have to work this out locally to come up with the other $5 million, but they're wanting to know by noon tomorrow with, kind of which way we're going. And so I think this is informational. We don't have a plan on our CIP for the 7.5 right now. This would take it to, if we did a two-way with the city and county, it's $10 million. We don't have a plan for that. We knew this was a possibility. I think we can make a plan, but just trying to, I guess I'm just looking for feedback, make sure that we're headed in the right direction if we say to the city and to the state, go for this 20 million and we'll figure out how to pay for it. I think it'll come out in the middle of September. They'll make their decisions sometime after September. We'll know if we actually get it, and then we'll start working on how to do that. Of course, it is the state highway system, so my opening position is they ought to pick up the 5 million, but they got problems too. So be happy to try to answer any questions that you might have, if I can.
Jim, and remind me, did we, is this a part of a WAMPO project too? Or-
I don't think there are any WAMPO funds in it. We did have, a year or so ago, we partnered with Wichita. We put $1 million in to do right-of-way and stuff up there. I don't think we've tacked much of that money. That may be a resource for it. But so far, there's not been a project submitted to WAMPO. It would have to come through the state. And because of the federal funds, it'll come through WAMPO anyway, but none of the local WAMPO money that you're thinking about, the $12 or $13 million a year, has been dedicated to this thing yet.
Okay. Could that be, if the state applied through WAMPO, would that be something that, I may be chasing.
Well, I think
here,
if there
but
was funds that didn't get spent by other projects, you know how we always have some left over, that those could be probably allocated back into this project. There are probably places that get funds, but in this short time frame, I can't tell you where they are. My recommendation is that we tell them, yeah, we'll work it out later, go ahead for the 20 million. It's kind of an indicator to me that they like the project, but they're either trying to spread the money out a little thinner. It's kind of a big year. You want to make a lot of people happy. And so they're potentially offering us 80% of the maximum.
And the max was 25 million on this
25.
whole build project?
Yes.
On nationwide?
Nationwide, it's 25 on a build project. Infra can go bigger, but we've tried infra's. Build is the one that's going right now.
Right. I appreciate that, because I did run into Congressman Estes this weekend, and he had mentioned that he had had a brief conversation in support of this with, was it Secretary Chow?
Chow, yes.
Chow, right. And so, I mean, there's positive progress for sure, and I think KDOT being is teamwork oriented with our region or our area. Personally, I'm for trying to do it, and then we figure out how do we, if we can still get more than 20, that's obviously great, but if not, somehow we can group together the team to come up. But, okay, Commissioner Dennis?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Well, this build grant is our best chance of moving forward with the next phase, which we sorely need, because we're going to finish up the phase we're in now, and we need to move forward as quickly as we can after this first phase. And I think the public's going to be a little disenchanted with us if we just stop, because they've been going through all of this traffic congestion for some time, and they're not going to see any improvement other than we got a nicer road to drive on. Everything that we're doing right now is in prelude to the next phase. So we need to press forward with that next phase. We've got a number of partners that we've been working with. This is the #1 project for WAMPO, for the City of Wichita, for the Chamber of Commerce, and for Sedgwick County for some time. So I think that we need to go back and be very positive with the federal government, that we would love to have their full 25 million, but we certainly understand their fiscal constraints, and we'll do whatever it takes to make sure that we can press forward. So I think we need to go back and say, please give us the 25 million, but we'll work with WAMPO and our other partners to make this happen if we have to. Thank you.
Okay.
All right.
I don't see other comments. I think it's, you feel the direction. I can tell you, if the community understood that another major project that it's almost at completion is all this stuff on East Kellogg. And if we wouldn't have, that's going to be completed maybe by the end of this year still, finally, with everything. But my recollection says that if we wouldn't have done the teamwork with KTA and KDOT and the city and the state, that we would just now be finishing the first phase, and the next phase of Greenwich all the way to the Turnpike would just be starting next year for the next 5 years. So,
Well, I think you've hit it on the head. And just as an observation, as time has gone by, these programs have drifted to where they just require more local participation. Federal programs are trying to encourage private investment and investment from other places that aren't federal. And this is really, the grant and the infra grants are pretty much both built around that. And you say this is around 50% local, give or take. And that's, honestly, the more local you have, the better your chances. So.
Right. I agree. Okay, thank you.
All right,
Thanks
thank
for
you
the
very
update. Okay. Don? Okay. Commissioners, you have anything else you'd like to share? We do not have a meeting tomorrow, but we do have a meeting Thursday.
Well, special meeting Thursday at 10 a.m. That will just be a Zoom type of meeting, similar to the business meetings we've had the last couple of months dealing with COVID.
And that's
This
with our
topic will be
CARES
the
CARES committee.
Yeah.
So looking forward to that. That'll be very informational. So, okay, I don't see anything else, so we will stand adjourned. Everybody have a nice day, and we'll regroup on Thursday.